Welcome back to From the Flip Card, where I'm going to try to give you as much relevant information I can about the numbers and about the players in this upcoming game Sunday between the Vikings and the Ravens. And the reason I'm doing this is every week I'm coming up with all this information, and I want to share it with you, the viewers, so you can be as educated as possible going into the game on Sunday. And I just think that you're going to find it a much more enjoyable experience when you know more about the players, what's going on, what to look for. And football, there's a lot to it. It's a simple game in a lot of ways, but in some ways it's pretty complex. It's pretty multidimensional. I want to give you just as many insights as I can, and I really do believe you're going to enjoy the game a lot more. Now, as we get into this, I'm going to talk a lot about numbers, but then I'm going to give you some opinions. Now, all these opinions are backed up with film, and I'll leave a link right up here to my film study on the Baltimore Ravens, where I take a real deep look at Kyle Hamilton, Lamar Jackson, and Derrick Henry, because I think those are the three guys that you really have to account for when you play this team. All right, let's start with the Ravens defense. But the Ravens overall, a 3-5 operation. They lost 4 games in a row, lost their quarterback for a few weeks, but have managed to win 2 in a row. They beat the Chicago Bears, and they beat Miami last Thursday. So they're on a little bit of a mini bye. But as schizophrenic as they are this year, they were last year as well. I don't know how this thing works, but the defense mainly has really turned things around. So just the first 6 weeks of this season, or the first 5 weeks of this season, you got to listen to these defensive numbers. The Ravens defense allowed weeks 1 through 5, allowed 35.4 points a game, 408.8 yards per game, 146.4 yards on the ground, and an opposing TD percentage rate in the red zone of 76%. That means every time a team crossed the 20, they had a 76% chance of scoring a touchdown, and only had 2 takeaways. Since then, weeks 6 through 9, average points per game, 13. That's second best in the NFL from weeks 6 through 9. 315 yards a game, 85.7 yards rushing. The red zone touchdown percentage drops to 27.3, and they have 5 takeaways, 3 of which they got last week against Miami. So what happened here? What's going on? Well, the Ravens made a couple of moves personnel-wise, and they made some moves on the field. Around week 6, they brought in Alohi Gilman. Okay, he's a safety from the Rams, I believe. They bring him in. And it's not necessarily that they added him. It's what they did with Kyle Hamilton. So Kyle Hamilton, who spent the first 5 weeks of the season in the back end. He was only in the box, down in the paint, 17.4% of the time. From week 6 through 9, he's been down in the paint 56.9% of the time, and he's been blitzing. He blitzed off the edge against Miami 3 or 4 times, up the middle, all those things. So basically, Zach Orr sat down during the bye and looked at the problems that they were having, and their main problem was just getting pressure on the quarterback. This Ravens team was even now, but they're only pressuring the opposing quarterback 26.1% of the time. That's 30th in the NFL. They only have 11 sacks. They're 2 sack leaders, each with 2 apiece. So their leading sacker on the team had 2. That was Matabike and Robinson. They're both on IR. The next best guy is Mike Green at a sack and a half, and then Trenton Simpson at a sack and a half. So they just haven't been able to get pressure on the quarterback. So what did they do? They take Alohi Gilman, put him in the back end, bring down Kyle Hamilton, who's such a multifaceted player. He can cover, he can blitz, he can do all those things, a lot like Josh Metellus, and they just move him all over. And he's creating things. He's making things happen. He's making this defense much better. So this all comes at a cost, however. Alohi Gilman is not one of the best tacklers in this league, okay? And in fact, Miami, I think, took advantage of him a couple of times with missed tackles. So the Vikings need to find a way to get the ball out quickly, because when you get the ball out quickly, you neutralize any of the blitzes that Kyle Hamilton might be wanting to do, and you get your Jordan Addison's and Justin Jefferson's one-on-one in space. Make Alohi Gilman tackle. That's what the Vikings need to do. Those plays can become big plays if you do that. Now, The other thing that the Ravens did is they traded just recently for Draymond Jones. Now, Draymond Jones comes in with 4.5 sacks from the Tennessee Titans. By having 4.5 sacks, he has 3 times as many as the next guy on this Ravens defense. That's how hard it's been for them to get after the quarterback. Draymond Jones has a sack in each of the last 4 games. That ties him with Brian Burns, who has 11 overall, but it's the longest current streak in the NFL, 4 games in a row. So he's been on a little bit of a roll. Roquan Smith, one of the better box linebackers that you're going to see, struggles a little bit with coverage. So play action possibilities across the middle of the field between he and Teddy Buchanan. I think you can make some haste, but you have to run the ball first. You have to sell the run in order to get behind him. Out in the corners, Marlon Humphrey does a pretty good job. Very, very good athlete. Tends to bite on the double moves. So somehow if we could set him up on the outside, that's kind of his kryptonite. And then Nate Wiggins on the opposite side. So defensively, you're really dealing with a team that has a hard time getting after the quarterback. Hopefully that will mean the Minnesota Vikings can extend some drives and do some things and not go backwards as much. There's 2 things as we transition over to the Vikings offense. There's 2 things that J.J. McCarthy needs to improve upon. Number 1 is his completion percentage. He's at 57.6% right now. That's definitely not good enough. You want to get that number as close to 70%, especially in this offense, as you possibly can. The other problem is he's been sacked 14 times. He's only played 3 games, sacked 14 times. That's 21% of his dropbacks end up with a sack. So protection for the Vikings needs to be better. You're facing a team that's having a really, really hard time getting after the quarterback. You just have to be aware of the guys on the outside. Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins. Oh, and by the way, they got this new rookie safety, Malachi Starks. He's one of 2 rookies in the entire NFL that has started every game for their team as a rookie. He has 1 interception. He's also a very good tackler. So if you want to get someone tackling, make it Gilman, not Starks. I think Starks is doing a really, really good job. But Aaron Jones, hopefully his shoulder will be ready to go, but the running game will be important. This could be a chance for the Vikings to run more out of a 3 wide receiver type of a look, because these guys are big on the inside. When I say big, listen to this. Interior defensive tackles. Number 98, Travis Jones, 6'4", 341. He's bookended by John Jenkins, the other defensive tackle, 6'3", 340. And oh, by the way, when those 2 big guys get tired, they bring in C.J. Okoye, 6'6", 370. So the downhill running game, as much as it's been a challenge for the Vikings, I don't know if this is the time or the place to do this. Other interesting notes: McCarthy doesn't have a game with over 160 yards passing. That's where the completion percentage is going to matter. Okay, that's those 5-10 yard passes. Those add up, over time. He's only the 4th QB since 1970 with sub 160-yard passes with 20-plus attempts in each of his first 3 games. So the Vikings haven't used him as much. Couple of bad stats. We're used to bad stats or challenging ones. We saw a ton of them against Detroit. QBs making their first 10 starts versus Lamar Jackson are 0-12. Okay, so opposing quarterbacks making one of their first 10 starts against Lamar currently are 0-12. Making their first 5, 0-6, which is pretty amazing. And then Harbaugh is 52-18 when facing a quarterback in his first or second season. That's the 3rd best of any head coach since 1950. 2 above him, Shula and Belichick, pretty good coaches. So, the Ravens, you have to stay out of 3rd and 7+. I think that's going to be another key for the Minnesota Vikings because of their need to get fancy and do different things to get after the quarterback. It makes it a lot easier for the defense when it's 3rd and 7+ because you can blitz. Even if the offense throws hot, you should be able to have a throw, catch, tackle, and then 4th and 1, etc. Doing a better job on 1st and 2nd down, getting it to 3rd and 5 or less is going to be key, because if you get the 3rd and long against this crew, they're going to throw some weird things at you. They're getting creative. They're going to do a lot of those. Quick hitting runs have worked well, and Tua Tagovailoa in Miami missed a lot of tight ends down the middle of the field. So, that's something, that's another opportunity there. So TJ Hawkinson down the middle of the field, if we can keep our quarterback upright, I think it might work well. So let's flip this behemoth piece of paper over and talk a little bit about this Ravens offense. So the first thing to note is they run the ball, and they run everything. They do everything. They run the counter. They run the counter power. They run the trap. They run the zone. They run the wide zone. They run the option. They run the RP. They run all of them. The difference, though, is this offensive line isn't as physical, not as physical as Detroit, that's for sure, but not as physical as we've seen in the past. Ronnie Staley is the left tackle. He's been a little soft lately. Tyler Lindbaum, very, very good center, but he's a little bit light. Daniel Falele, the right guard, big man, but ducks his head, so movement will work, I think, well with him. And then the right tackle, Roger Rosengarten, he struggled a lot in Miami on the snap count, meaning he was late. So crowd noise, that's on you, but crowd noise is going to be important. Now, Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson right now has a 72.9 completion percentage. Remember we talked about JJ 56%? Lamar's at 72.9. So it's kind of a ridiculous number. Just listen to these numbers. So 72.9% completion percentage, 9.1 yards per pass attempt. That's second best in the NFL. He rushes for 36 yards a game. That's third in the NFL. His passer rating, 136.7. Number one in the NFL. 136.7, where our guy, JJ, 73. So he's almost twice. But yeah, Lamar's been, he's been unbelievable. He leads the NFL in touchdown to completion ratio, meaning every 11.9 passes he takes, one of them ends in a touchdown. The only guy, he's led the league twice before in this category, in the touchdown to pass ratio. If he leads the league again this year, it'll be his third year. That'll tie him with Steve Young. The only guys that have done it 4 times are Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre. So that's pretty impressive. 14 touchdowns, only 1 interception. Has been sacked 17 times. So it's tough. That number, that 14 touchdown, 1 interception in the first 5 games of the season, the only others that do this are Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Y.A. Tittle back in 1963. So, yeah, Lamar, he was a little rusty, I think, the first half against Miami, but the second half he was absolutely brilliant. And in my film review, I kind of take you through one drive where one play he's beating you with his legs, and next time he's looking off the underneath coverage in his zone and making things happen. And then later on, seeing man-to-man and being able to check to pick routes and opening up the offense. So it's not complicated what they do. It's a lot of 2x2 formations when they want to throw the football with different combos. They'll shift in motion a little bit to try to get to know if it's man or zone. But they execute it so very well. And from a personnel standpoint, they have the ability to go big. So whether or not they'll go big and just run the football is probably the biggest question mark. We all know about Derrick Henry and how big he is, and he's on a bit of a roll. Over 100 yards rushing in 2 of his last 3 games, gets 119 yards on 19 carries against the Miami Dolphins. And in case you didn't know, he's the 8th player in NFL history with 12,000 yards and over 100 rushing touchdowns. So he's not sneaking up on anybody. He's one of the best there is, and he's big. And don't get all happy if we shut him down in the first half because he does a lot of his damage once he wears this defense down. Patrick Ricard is big fullback, doesn't really catch the ball or run the ball. He just blocks people out of the way. So he's in there to be a battering ram. Mark Andrews, very, very good tight end. Second on the team in receptions, 4 touchdowns for Mark Andrews. So when you get in that red zone, you got to pay attention to where number 89 is. Isaiah Likely, the other tight end, they'll flex him out in a kind of a 3 wide receiver look. More of a wide receiver than a blocking tight end, but really does a good job, has a great feel for when Lamar's extending plays with his legs. He can find the empty places in the zones and make big things happen. Wide receiver-wise, Zay Flowers, 1 fumble. He has 6 games this year with over 60 receiving yards. That's tied for the 3rd longest in the NFL right now. But only 1 touchdown reception. And then on the other side, Rashad Bateman, who got a nice 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct when he thought a penalty should have been called. Kind of like me with the not calling of the push-off. We have tempers. That, those things happen. He has 2 touchdowns this year, 15 receptions, 184 yards. So, the ball gets spread out. I really don't think that there's a particular guy on offense that you have to shut down other than the quarterback. Now, Brian Flores has had success. Lamar is 1-1 versus a Brian Flores-led defense. Both times he played him, it was down in Miami. The max blitz, meaning 6 or more blitzers, which we will do, was very effective against Lamar back then. His passer rating for that game was 83.9, and he was sacked 4 times. That was week 10 of 2021. So whether or not the Vikings will go that route, we shall see. But it's worked in the past. Other than that, it's they're -3 in the take gives. They had 3 turnovers last week. We're -4. That's something else that the Vikings have to really straighten out. But overall, this will be it's going to come down to, can the Vikings stop Lamar Jackson? Can they stop Derrick Henry? And then can we offensively protect the quarterback, give him some time? I think J.J. McCarthy could have one of his best yardage days if they give him time, because this team is struggling to get after the quarterback. So other than that, that's about it. Now you know pretty much everything you need to know going into this Minnesota Viking Baltimore Ravens game Sunday at noon. I'll be there. Hopefully you'll be there. So God bless and Skol Vikings.